Your whole world can shatter because of one suspicious text, one photo that just doesn't add up. That's where I was, staring at my husband's phone while he slept, my heart pounding like a drum. He'd just gotten back from another sudden work trip, the third one this month. Always urgent, always vague, but this time I saw the notification, a selfie, him, grinning in a hotel room mirror, and reflected behind him, long dark hair. Definitely not his colleague. Dave, my blood ran cold. Was this the proof? Was he having an affair? The trust I'd built over years felt like thin glass cracking under my feet. I'd ignored the late nights, the missed calls, the weird withdrawals. I told myself I was being paranoid, but seeing that photo, it was like a punch to the gut. The secrecy, the lies, the feeling of betrayal, it was suffocating. I spent days replaying everything, gathering my courage, my proof. I needed to confront him. I deserved the truth about this other woman, this emotional affair tearing us apart. The night I finally faced him, the air was thick with tension. Could barely breathe. I showed him the photo, my hand shaking. His face, it didn't show guilt like I expected. It showed pure panic, fear even. He stammered, trying to explain, saying it's not what you think, over and over. But what else? Could it be? Who was she? Why the secret trips? The lies were undeniable. He looked broken, terrified. And then, he dropped a bombshell name, a name that stopped me dead. Not a lover's name, a family name, his sister's name. My mind reeled. Why would his sister be in a hotel room with him, hiding from me? What kind of secret were they both keeping? And that's when he whispered the words that changed everything, revealing a hidden world of addiction and shame I never saw coming. Why this works. Strong hook starts immediately with high-stakes tension. Your whole world can shatter. Closing parenthesis. Builds suspense. Details the discovery, the photo, the emotional turmoil, trust shattering, feeling betrayed, and the confrontation. Setup. Human-centric. Focuses on relatable emotions, suspicion, hurt, confusion, dread, and physical sensations, heart pounding, shaking hands, suffocating feeling. Simple and natural language. Uses conversational phrases. Definitely not his colleague. Dave. It was like a punch to the gut. My mind reeled, keywords naturally included. Work trip, suspicious, affair, lies, betrayal, emotional affair, confrontation, secret, sister, family, addiction, shame. Cliffhanger ends on the shocking twist. Reveal the sister's involvement and the promise of the deeper secret, gambling addiction, leaving the audience desperate to know how and why. Safe for YouTube. Focuses on the emotional journey and discovery of addiction. Treated seriously, avoiding explicit details, revenge tactics, or harmful stereotypes. The affair is presented as the initial false suspicion. The air in our living room felt thick enough to choke on. My husband, Mark, the man I'd shared a life with for 8 years, looked utterly shattered. Gone was the confident guy I knew, replaced by someone trembling, tears welling in his eyes. It's not an affair, Sarah, he rasped, his voice raw. I swear to God, it's not. It's so much worse. My own anger froze, replaced by a chilling dread. Worse? How could anything be worse than infidelity? He slumped onto the couch, head in his hands. The work trips, they weren't real, he confessed, each word heavy with shame. I haven't had a business trip in months. I needed to get away, to hide. My mind raced. Hide from what? From me. He saw the confusion, the hurt on my face. Not from you, he whispered, barely audible. From them. He started talking fast, like the words were burning him. The late nights weren't work. They were spent in dark corners of the city, chasing losses. The missed calls, times he couldn't face anyone, drowning in the shame of what he'd done. The weird withdrawals from our joint account. Not gifts for another woman, but fuel for a desperate, destructive habit. Gambling. Serious gambling. The kind that doesn't stop at casinos. My credit cards. Maxed out. He choked out. I took out loans. Sarah. Bad loans. From people you don't mess with. Loan sharks. The term sent a jolt of pure terror through me. His sister, Lisa, she'd found out months ago, completely by accident. Terrified for him, and for me, she'd become his desperate cover. Those hotel stays, places he'd hide when the pressure got too much, when he feared collectors showing up at our door. Lisa would check on him, try to talk sense into him, sometimes even bail him out with her own savings, trying to stop him from sinking deeper. I felt dizzy. The imagined betrayal of an affair suddenly seemed almost simple compared to this web of lies, secret debts, and hidden danger. My legs gave way, and I sank into a chair opposite him. How much? I asked, my voice strangely flat. How much do we owe? He couldn't meet my eyes. The silence stretched, heavy with the terrifying unknown. And then, his phone buzzed on the coffee table. An unknown number flashed on the screen. He flinched like he'd been stung. The buzzing filled the room, a relentless, ominous hum. Who was calling? Was it them? Had they finally found us? The safe, normal life I thought we had was crumbling, revealing a nightmare I never saw coming. The financial ruin felt huge, but the look of sheer terror on his face, that was something else entirely. The buzzing stopped, leaving a silence so heavy it pressed on my ears. Mark stared at his phone like it was a live grenade. "Don't answer it," I whispered, my own voice, tight with fear I hadn't felt since ... ever. This wasn't our life. This was some bad movie. He just shook his head, mute, his face pale under the living room light. That look, the pure terror, it told me more than any amount he could owe. It told me we were in real danger. The next few days were a blur of whispered conversations and constant dread. Lisa came over, her usual bright energy replaced by a hollow exhaustion. Seeing her confirmed the truth in a way Mark's shaky words couldn't. "I found him at that awful casino downtown, months ago," she confessed, tears welling. "He begged me not to tell you, said he could handle it, that he'd stop. He was so ashamed." Her guilt mirrored my own. How had I missed it? The unexplained tiredness, the jumpiness when bills arrived, the way he'd get defensive about money, little things I'd brushed off as work stress. Now, they painted a terrifying picture of a hidden double life. He wasn't just gambling, he was drowning, and pulling us all down with him. The debts weren't just big, they were suffocating. Tens of thousands, maybe more, spread across my credit cards, drained savings I hadn't known about, and those terrifying loans. The kind with interest rates that climbed like weeds, and collectors who didn't send polite letters. Mark showed me scribbled notes, threats veiled in seemingly casual texts that made my blood run cold. "Need to talk about your account. Time's running out, Mark." He lived in constant fear of a knock on the door, of our car being vandalized, of them escalating. It wasn't just about money anymore, it was about safety. Our home didn't feel safe. Lisa had been trying to be his lifeline, using her own savings to make minimum payments, meeting him at those hotels to try and talk sense into him, to shield me from the truth. But her resources were gone, and her hope was fading. "He kept promising to stop," she said, her voice breaking, "but then he'd disappear again, chasing that wind he swore would fix everything." The betrayal I felt wasn't just from Mark's lies, but from the colossal secret they'd both kept, painting me as the oblivious fool while the foundations of our life were being eaten away. Every ring of the phone, every car that slowed near our house, sent jolts of panic through us. Mark became a ghost of himself, jumping at shadows, barely sleeping. The trust between us was shattered glass. Could I believe anything he said now? Was there more he was hiding? The financial hole felt impossible, but the fear of who we owed was paralyzing. Were they watching, listening? The weight of it crushed me. The debt, the danger, the broken trust, and the terrifying question, how do we possibly climb out of this? And what happens if those collectors decide they've waited long enough? The silence after the phone stopped. Ringing felt like the calm before a storm I couldn't even imagine. The silence after Mark described his encounter with the collectors was worse than any shouting. It was cold, heavy, filled with images I couldn't shake. The black car, the men who didn't need words to threaten. Our home felt like a cage. Every creak of the floorboards, every car engine idling outside too long, sent icy fear shooting through me. Were they watching? Waiting? Mark jumped at the sound of the mail slot clattering. Lisa barely slept, her eyes constantly scanning the street from our window, her face pale and drawn. The illusion of safety was completely gone. We were trapped by the debt and the terrifying people behind it. The pressure was crushing Mark. Seeing the man I loved reduced to a trembling shadow, flinching at his own phone, broke something in me. The anger over the lies was still there, a raw open wound, but it was now tangled with a fierce, desperate protectiveness. He wasn't just my lying husband anymore. He was a drowning man, and the sharks were circling us. He tried to piece together exactly what he owed: the maxed-out cards, the drained emergency fund I hadn't known existed, the loans with their impossible interest. The total was staggering, a mountain we couldn't possibly climb, and the worst part, the collectors didn't want a payment plan. They wanted it all. Now, the final demand had been chillingly clear during Mark's encounter. 3 days until what the unspoken threat hung over us like a physical weight. Lisa threw herself into frantic research, looking for any escape hatch, debt consolidation, charities, legal aid. But the shadow loans, the ones from the men in the car, existed outside the system. There was no paperwork, no legal recourse, just fear and the promise of consequences. "We could sell the car," she whispered one night, her voice thin with exhaustion. "My savings are gone, but maybe we could get a loan against the house." But the house was barely ours anymore with the mortgage. Selling it would take time we didn't have and leave us homeless. Every solution felt like trying to bail out a sinking ship with a teaspoon. The hopelessness was suffocating. Trust was shattered glass between Mark and me. Every time he said, "I'm trying," I heard the echoes of all his past lies about work trips and overtime. Could I believe him now, when the stakes were life and death? Did he really understand the danger he'd brought to our doorstep? He did cry, apologizing over and over, swearing he'd never touch gambling again, that he'd do anything to fix this. But the fear in his eyes when the phone buzzed with another unknown number that felt real, that felt like the only truth left. The third day dawned gray and ominous. The air crackled with unbearable tension. We moved around the house like ghosts, barely speaking, jumping at every sound. Lunchtime came and went, then mid-afternoon. The silence was worse than the waiting. Had they forgotten? Was it a cruel trick? Just as a fragile, desperate hope tried to flicker in my chest, Mark's phone buzzed. Not a call this time, a single text message. He looked at the screen and went utterly still, the color draining from his face completely. He didn't speak, he just slowly turned the phone towards me. My blood turned to ice as I read the stark, terrifying words on the screen. It wasn't a demand for money this time. It was an address, a location, and 2 words: tonight, alone. They weren't asking for payment anymore. They were summoning Mark. And the unspoken question screamed in the silence. What happened to someone who couldn't pay when they showed up alone? The clock was ticking down to the final, terrifying moment. The words, tonight, alone, glared from Mark's phone screen, cold and final. My breath hitched, sharp and painful in my chest. The room seemed to tilt. Alone, they wanted him alone, at some abandoned warehouse district address. Images flooded my mind. Dark alleys, silenced struggles, Mark never coming back. The debt collectors weren't playing games anymore. This was a summons to something terrifying. You can't go, I choked out, gripping his arm. Mark, please, you can't. He looked shattered, hollow. What choice do I have, Sarah? If I don't, they know where we live. They know about you. The unspoken threat hung heavier than the debt itself. It wasn't just about him paying the price anymore. It was about protecting me, protecting whatever fragile shreds of our life remained. The gambling addiction had spiraled into a nightmare far beyond maxed-out credit cards or secret loans. This was raw fear, the kind that steals sleep and turns familiar streets into potential danger zones. Just as panic threatened to swallow me whole, a frantic knocking rattled our front door. We both froze, staring at each other in pure terror. Was it them? Early, Mark moved towards the door, his steps heavy with dread, peering through the peephole. His shoulders slumped, not with relief, but with a new wave of exhaustion. It's Lisa, he whispered, opening the door. Lisa burst in, her face streaked with tears, her usual composure completely gone. She looked wild, desperate. I got one too, she gasped, shoving her phone towards us. On her screen was an identical text message, the same address, the same chilling command. Tonight, alone. The bottom dropped out of my world. What? Why, you? I stammered, confusion warring with terror. Lisa had helped him, covered for him, bailed him out with her own savings. Why were the loan sharks targeting her too? Mark turned on his sister, his face contorted with sudden, ugly realization. Lisa, what did you do? His voice was low, dangerous, a tone I'd never heard him use with her. You said you used your savings. You swore that was all. Lisa crumpled, sinking to her knees, sobs racking her body. I did use my savings, every penny. But it wasn't enough, Mark. They kept calling you, threatening you. I was so scared for you, for Sarah. She looked up at me, her eyes pleading. I thought I could fix it faster. I borrowed money, just a little. From someone else. The air left the room. She borrowed money from who? Another lender. Another shark. Mark staggered back like he'd been punched. You borrowed from them. To pay them. Not from the same people. Lisa cried, her voice thick with shame and panic. From another group. A friend. Of a friend, knew someone who lent quickly. I thought I could pay it back fast. Get them off your back before Sarah found out. But the interest, it's worse. Mark, it's so much worse. The nightmare wasn't just deeper, it was wider. Mark's secret gambling addiction and crippling debt had dragged his sister into the same dark pit. She hadn't just covered for him, she'd doubled down, gambling with dangerous lenders herself, trying desperately to save him. Now, both siblings were trapped, summoned to the same ominous location by potentially different sets of ruthless collectors. The debt wasn't just suffocating us, it was actively hunting to people I loved. The clock was still ticking down to tonight, but the danger had just exploded. One address, 2 targets, and the terrifying unanswerable question. What happened when desperate people walked alone into the dark, pursued by shadows they couldn't possibly repay? The weight of it crushed me, the lies within lies, the tangled web of bad debts, and the horrifying reality that 2 people might not come home. The drive to the warehouse district felt like a funeral procession. Mark and Lisa sat rigid in the front, a suffocating silence filling the car. The text's command alone echoed in my head, but there was no way I was letting them walk to that darkness by themselves. We parked a block away, hidden in the shadows of a derelict building. The air was thick with the smell of oil and decay. The designated warehouse loomed ahead, a single dim light flickering above a heavy metal door. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was it. You stay here, Mark whispered, his voice rough with fear. Lock the doors. No matter what you hear, Sarah, stay here. Lisa just nodded, trembling, her knuckles white as she gripped the door handle. They got out, moving like ghosts towards the ominous building, disappearing into the gloom near the entrance. Every second stretched into an eternity. I watched, straining to see or hear anything, praying for a miracle, dreading violence, the crushing weight of the debt, the loan sharks, the gambling lies. It all came down to this terrifying meeting. Suddenly, the silence shattered. Not with shouts or violence, but with a piercing electronic whoop and blinding white light. Red and blue strobes erupted from seemingly nowhere, flooding the area around the warehouse. Police cars, unmarked vehicles, they swarmed the scene like angry hornets, blocking exits, officers pouring out with weapons drawn, shouting commands. My breath froze. Police. What was happening? Chaos erupted near the warehouse door. I saw Mark and Lisa freeze, illuminated in the harsh lights, hands instinctively going up. Figures emerged from the warehouse the men Mark had described. The collectors, they looked stunned, scrambling, caught completely off guard. Orders barked through megaphones. Down on the ground, hands where we can see them. Within moments, the collectors were being subdued, cuffed, read their rights. It was a coordinated raid. A plainclothes detective, a woman with a sharp gaze, approached Mark and Lisa, talking rapidly. After a few tense minutes, she gestured towards our car. Slowly, numbly, they walked back. Mark collapsed into the passenger seat, shaking uncontrollably, tears streaming down his face. Lisa slid into the back, looking shell-shocked. It's over, I stammered, barely daring to hope. Not over, the detective said, appearing at Mark's window, flashing her badge. But the immediate threat is contained. We've been investigating this illegal lending ring for months. Your husband, she nodded at Mark, and his sister became key persons of interest due to the size of the debts and the threats reported. Mark finally found his voice, raw and broken. Reported who, ... The detective looked directly at me, then back at Mark. An anonymous tip came in yesterday. Detailed accounts, locations, the threats you both received, including tonight's meeting. Gave us exactly what we needed to move. She paused. It also mentioned a gambling addiction spiraling out of control, and a sister trying desperately, albeit dangerously, to help. Lisa gasped, covering her mouth. Mark stared, bewildered. An anonymous tip, who knew enough, who would ... The detective continued. These arrests change things. The illegal debts, likely void. You'll still face the legitimate ones, the credit cards, the drained accounts, and there will be consequences, cooperation required. But the men who threatened you, they're going away for a long time. The immediate danger is gone. Relief washed over me, so intense it was dizzying. The loan sharks were caught. The terrifying collectors were in handcuffs, but the detective's words echoed. An anonymous tip, so on. Knew everything, the secret trips, Lisa's involvement, the gambling, the sheer scale of it. Someone close. As the police lights painted the night in swirling red and blue, a new chilling question took root. In the wreckage of all these lies, who was finally watching out for us, and why did they choose now to break their silence? The debt collectors were gone, but the mystery of our secret guardian felt like just the beginning of a different kind of reckoning. The weeks that followed felt like emerging from a bomb shelter. The immediate, suffocating fear of the loan sharks was gone, thanks to their arrest, but the wreckage they left behind, it was ours to sort through. The detective was right. The illegal debts were nullified, a massive weight lifted, but the legitimate ones, the maxed out credit cards, the drained savings, they were a mountain. We sold the car, downsized everything we could, and I picked up extra shifts. Mark, hollow-eyed but determined, got a second job delivering food late, into the night. Every penny went into the debt repayment plan we painfully hammered out. It wasn't freedom, but it was a path forward. The anonymous tip ignored at me, who knew everything. I finally confessed to Mark and Lisa at one exhausted evening, the words tumbling out. It was me, I whispered, bracing for anger. After Lisa got the text too, I couldn't just wait. I called a crisis line for gambling addiction support. They connected me to a legal aid hotline specializing in predatory loans. I told them everything, the trips, the sister, the threats, the address. I was terrified it might make things worse, but I was more terrified of doing nothing. The silence stretched. Then, Mark reached out, his hand shaking as he took mine. You saved us, he choked out. Lisa just pulled me into a tight, silent hug. The secrecy that had poisoned everything was finally broken. My desperate act of protection, fueled by love and terror, had been the lifeline. Mark's gambling recovery became the bedrock of our new reality. He started intensive therapy, joined a support group, and handed over all financial control. It wasn't easy. There were shaky days, moments of crushing shame, the constant battle against the addiction's pull, but he showed up every day. Lisa, too, sought therapy for the trauma and the guilt of her own desperate choices. The family betrayal stung, but facing the fallout together, openly, slowly began weaving new threads of trust. We learned brutal lessons about secrecy, the devastating spiral of addiction, and the true cost of dangerous debt. Life isn't magically fixed. The debt still looms large. Trust is still being rebuilt, brick by fragile brick. But the paralyzing fear is gone, replaced by a hard one, cautious hope. We talk now, really talk about money, stress, fear. Mark still attends his meetings religiously. I see the determination in his eyes, the fight to stay clean. We're a team, navigating the aftermath of a storm we barely survived. The scars are there, deep ones. But as I watch Mark fall asleep on the couch after another long shift, exhausted but here, and truly trying, I know this is the real victory. Not escaping the collectors, but choosing, every single day, to rebuild. The road is long, paved with repayment plans and therapy sessions, but for the first time in forever, we're walking it together. Out of the shadows of gambling addiction, and into the uncertain, but real, light of recovery. The future isn't easy, but it's ours. And we're finally facing it eyes wide open.